I never asked to be here among these so-called superior species. Humanity had once believed that reaching the stars would be our greatest triumph, a unifying moment that would cement our place among the great civilizations of the universe. Instead, we became a footnote, a joke whispered in the halls of power, a relic of a species that had reached beyond its grasp and found itself wanting. When the Zelvok Dominion made contact with Earth, they didn't come with weapons or warships. They didn't need to. They came with technology so advanced it might as well have been magic, with ships that made our finest engineering look like primitive toys. They didn't conquer us. They didn't even see the need. They simply absorbed us into their vast empire like a drop of water swallowed by the ocean. At first, humanity tried to prove itself, sending its best and brightest to compete in the galactic stage. We wanted to show them that we were more than what they believed, that we had value, strength, something to offer. But in every way that mattered, we fell short. Our biology was frail compared to the towering, armored warriors of the Zelvok. Our lifespans were short compared to the timeless intellects of the Drelka. Even our greatest scientific minds were centuries behind the union of the 12 suns, who could manipulate gravity as easily as we once shaped metal. And so we became little more than a curiosity, a lesser species tolerated but never respected. They called us the soft ones, an oddity among the titans that ruled the stars. Some even kept humans as exotic servants, not quite slaves, but never equals. When I was recruited to work aboard the Interstellar Research Station, Xipher Prime, I thought I had been chosen for my intelligence, my expertise. I was wrong. I was there to be a mascot, a living reminder that the mighty Zelvok had a sense of humor. "You humans are frail," sneered Captain Thrix one evening as we stood in the observation deck. His scaled form shimmered under the station's artificial light, his golden eyes gleaming with amusement. "No claws, no natural armor, no strength to speak of. How did your kind even survive on your homeworld?" The others laughed. I clenched my fists. There was no point in arguing. Any time I tried, they would counter with cold, irrefutable logic. Yes, humanity had survived against all odds, but only through cunning and tools, things these species had long surpassed. Against their natural weapons and resilience, we were little more than brittle flesh wrapped around fragile bones. So I swallowed my anger. I played the role they expected, laughing weakly when they mocked me, nodding when they made absurd claims about how lucky humans had been to last as long as we did. And yet deep down, I never stopped watching, never stopped listening, because while they saw me as weak, I saw something they didn't: arrogance. Arrogance that would one day cost them everything. The moment came unexpectedly, a distress signal from the edge of uncharted space, weak and ancient, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. The station's council debated whether it was worth investigating. The Zelvok were wary. This region of space, known as the Abyss, was avoided even by the bravest among them. Legends spoke of ships that had ventured into its depths, never to return. Likely just an old wreck, one scientist dismissed. But an unknown wreck, I pointed out. It could hold forgotten technology, lost knowledge. Isn't that why we're here? Some of them hesitated, but Captain Thrix scoffed. "Fine, let the human go," he said, shaking his massive head. "If he dies, at least he'll be useful for once." I kept my face neutral. Inside, my heart pounded. I had no idea that I was about to step into something beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The journey to the Abyss was longer than expected. Even with the station's most advanced scout ship, it took days to reach the source of the distress signal. The void here felt different, heavier, as if we were trespassers in a place long forgotten by the universe. Stars that should have burned brightly were dimmed, their light strangled by unseen forces. The navigational AI, which had guided countless expeditions without error, faltered, struggling to process the distortions in space. The aliens on board grew uneasy. These were beings who had conquered entire systems, but here, in this forsaken part of the galaxy, they felt the weight of something older than their dominion. When we finally arrived, we found it drifting silently in the darkness. The ship was massive, at least 5 times the size of our scout vessel, its hull scarred by battle and time. It had no active energy readings, no visible signs of life, and yet it still felt alive, as if it had been waiting. The aliens murmured among themselves, scanning the vessel with their instruments. One of the Zelvok officers snorted. Human design, without a doubt, crude, obsolete. I stared at it, my mind racing. That was impossible. Humanity had never built ships capable of reaching this far into space. Our technology was limited, our reach even more so. And yet, the shape of the hull, the faded markings, it was undeniably human. A deep unease settled in my chest. If this ship was here, then the history of my species was far more complicated than we had ever been told. Docking was a delicate process. The ship had no active docking systems, no response to our hails. We had to manually override the airlock, prying it open like forcing apart the jaws of a sleeping beast. The moment we stepped inside, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The air was stale but breathable. The ship's corridors were dimly lit by flickering emergency lights, casting long shadows against the walls. Dust coated every surface, and yet, despite the ship's apparent age, it was strangely intact. There were no signs of decomposed bodies, no remnants of crew belongings, nothing to indicate what had happened here. The others split off, eager to scavenge for anything valuable. I followed a different path, drawn deeper into the vessel by something I couldn't explain. The halls whispered with echoes, distant murmurs that made no sense. My footsteps felt heavier with each step, as if the very ship was pulling me forward. Then I saw it. At the heart of the vessel was a chamber unlike any other. It was pristine, untouched by time. A ring of glowing inscriptions circled the room, their meaning just beyond my understanding. And at the center, standing as if waiting for someone to claim it, was the armor. It wasn't like any human technology I had ever seen. The metal shifted subtly, its surface pulsing with an inner energy. It was neither bulky nor fragile, but something in between, something perfectly designed for war. I reached out, and the armor responded. The moment my fingers brushed against the armor, a pulse of energy surged through my body. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was something deeper, something that reached into my very mind. Images, thoughts, and memories that weren't my own flooded my consciousness. Battles fought in the cold void of space, weapons that shattered planets, armies clad in the same metal that now stirred before me. The armor was waking up. I stumbled back, gasping, my head spinning. The inscriptions on the walls flared to life, bathing the chamber in an eerie glow. The aliens must have noticed something was happening, because I heard their hurried footsteps approaching from the corridors. But in that moment, I didn't care. The armor had recognized me. It had chosen me. With a hiss, the plating unfolded, shifting like liquid metal before solidifying into interlocking plates. The pieces lifted into the air, swirling around me in a slow orbit, as if waiting for a command. My heart pounded. I could walk away, leave this thing untouched, pretend I had never seen it, or I could step forward and claim it. I took a deep breath and moved. The armor reacted instantly, snapping into place around me. It wasn't heavy as I expected. Instead, it felt weightless, like a second skin. My vision sharpened, my senses expanded. I could feel the ship now, the faint hum of dormant systems, the whisper of energy coursing through ancient circuit. This was more than just a suit. It was a living weapon. "Step away from that," a voice barked. I turned to see Captain Thrix and his soldiers standing at the entrance of the chamber, weapons drawn. Their expressions were no longer amused or condescending. They were afraid. What is that thing?" one of them muttered. I looked down at my hands. The armor's surface shimmered, adapting to my movements, its form adjusting as if responding to my very thoughts. I clenched my fist, and the metal shifted, forming an intricate gauntlet with veins of glowing energy running through it. "It's human technology," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "Impossible," Thrix spat. "Your kind never built anything like this." I wasn't sure if he was right or not. Humanity had no records of such technology, no knowledge of an era when we might have wielded power like this, but the armor knew me. It fit me perfectly. "Step out of it," Thrix ordered, his voice hardening. "Now!" I didn't move. The armor whispered in my mind, feeding me information, tactical readouts, weapon systems coming online. I could see their energy levels, their nervous heartbeats, the tiny twitches of their muscles as they tightened their grips on their weapons. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the weak one in the room. "You don't understand what this is?" I said, slowly. "But I do." Thrix bared his fangs. "Then you're a threat." He raised his weapon. I moved before he could. Pull the trigger. The moment Thrix raised his weapon, the armor reacted. It was faster than thought, faster than instinct. 1 second, I was standing still, staring at the barrel of his plasma rifle. The next, I had moved, closing the distance between us in the blink of an eye. My arm shot out, and before I even registered the action, I had grabbed the rifle's barrel and crushed it like it was made of paper. The metal crumpled in my grip, sparks flying as the weapon was rendered useless. Gasps and shouts erupted from the other soldiers. They scrambled back, eyes wide with disbelief. I could see it in their faces. The same creatures who had mocked me for being weak now stared at me with fear. "Stand down," I said, my voice calm but firm. Thrix was already moving, his instincts taking over. He lunged at me, claws flashing toward my throat. I barely even had to think. The armor responded for me. My hand snapped up, catching his wrist in an iron grip. He snarled and tried to pull away, but he couldn't. I wasn't just stronger than him, I was exponentially stronger. His muscles tensed, his body strained, but I didn't budge. "You don't want to do this," I warned. Thrix bared his fangs in frustration and swung his free hand at me. This time, the armor didn't wait. A pulse of energy surged through my body, and before his strike could land, an unseen force blasted him backward. He flew across the chamber, slamming into the far wall with enough force to crack the metal plating. He groaned, struggling to get up, but I could already tell I had broken something. The rest of the soldiers hesitated, their weapons still raised, but their confidence shaken. I could hear the rapid breathing, the slight tremors in their grips. They weren't just facing a human anymore, they were facing something they didn't understand. "This is a mistake," I said, stepping forward. "I didn't come here to fight. But if you force my hand, I will win." One of the officers, a smaller Zelvok with dull green scales, stepped forward nervously. You don't understand," he stammered. That armor, whatever it is, isn't just some lost artifact.
If it's human in origin, then that means... A loud clang cut him off. The ship trembled. Something deep within its structure rumbled to life. The lights in the chamber pulsed brighter for a brief moment, then settled into a steady glow on the
air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. I felt it immediately. The armor was syncing with the ship. It was waking it up. Thrix groaned, still slumped against the wall, but his voice was filled with rage. You don't know what you're dealing with, human. That thing isn't a gift. It's a weapon. I turned to face him. I know, and for the
first time I truly understood. This was just the beginning. The ship was alive. I could feel it in the way the air subtly shifted, in the way the metal beneath my feet vibrated with some long dormant energy now stirring. The armor on my body pulsed in rhythm with the ship, as if they were two parts of the same entity, two halves reconnecting after an eternity apart. My mind was clearer than it had ever been, filled with knowledge that I hadn't learned but somehow
knew. The ship's systems were awakening, reinitializing, recognizing me. I wasn't just wearing the armor. I was connected to it. The other aliens in the room were no longer just wary, they were terrified.
Their scales twitched, their tails coiled in defensive stances. Beings who had ruled over my kind, who had mocked and belittled humans as frail and unworthy, now looked at me like I was something else entirely. The ship trembled again, deeper, this time as if stretching after an impossibly long slumber. The alien who had spoken earlier, the green-scaled one, stepped forward hesitantly. "Human," he said carefully, his voice edged with something between awe and dread. "Do you know what you've done?" I looked down at my hands, clenching my fingers into a fist. The armor responded instantly, reshaping slightly, the energy veins in the gauntlet glowing brighter, as if acknowledging my intent.
I woke it up, I said. And it remembers me. Impossible, Thrix growled, still recovering from where I had thrown him. His pride was clearly wounded, but there was something else in his expression now. Something more than just hatred, fear. Your people don't have ships like this. You never did.
Then explain why this one responds to me, I shot back. He didn't have an answer. The inscriptions around the chamber flickered again, this time forming strange symbols in the air. No, not strange, familiar. I knew what they meant. Tactical, data, system readouts, status reports from a time long past. The ship had once been part of a fleet that no longer existed. I reached out, touching the nearest console. A pulse of energy surged through my body, and suddenly I could see, not just the room, not just the ship, but memories buried deep within its core. War, a war fought in the shadows of dead stars, against an enemy I couldn't fully comprehend. Flashes of battle filled my vision, ships unlike anything in modern, spacefaring civilizations wielding weapons that bent light, shattered moons. The armor had been part of it, worn by warriors who fought with skill beyond anything I had ever seen. And then, suddenly, silence. The fleet had been lost. The ship had been left adrift, forgotten in the abyss, waiting for something or someone to wake it. That someone was me. I pulled back, gasping. The others were staring at me, waiting, their hands still hovering over their weapons. The ship was never lost, I murmured. It was hidden. And now it was awake again. The ship's systems were coming back online, and with them a flood of information poured into my mind. It wasn't just schematics or data logs, it was memories, fragmented but powerful, as if the armor itself was trying to show me something important. I saw battles waged in the depths of space, fleets of massive vessels locked in combat against an enemy that was wrong. Their ships moved unnaturally, bending space around them in ways that defied logic. They weren't just invaders, they were consumers, devourers of light and matter, a force that erased everything in its path. The warriors who had worn this armor before me had fought against them, and they had lost. But humanity hadn't always been weak. No, we had stood against this enemy once, wielding weapons and technology far beyond what we had now. That knowledge had been buried, erased, and forgotten, until now. The ship's vibrations deepened, the energy coursing through its systems growing stronger. I could feel the power surging beneath my feet. The aliens around me were tense, their weapons still raised, but none of them fired. They were waiting to see what I would do. "Back away," I said, my voice calm but firm. Thrix sneered, still nursing his wounds. "You think we're going to let you walk out of here with that thing?" His claws flexed, and I could see the barely restrained rage in his golden eyes. "We don't know what that armor is, but I know one thing. You don't deserve it." The words might have stung before. Not now, not with the ship whispering its forgotten truths into my mind. "I didn't ask for it," I replied, stepping forward. The armor adjusted, plates shifting as if preparing for battle. "But it chose me, and I do know what it is." The green-scaled officer, the one who had spoken earlier, swallowed hard. "Then tell us," he said, "because if that ship is what I think it is, then we're all in danger." I hesitated, trying to process the weight of what I had seen. The knowledge was incomplete, fractured by time, but the message was clear. This was no ordinary ship. It was a relic from a time when humanity had been more than just an afterthought in the galaxy, a time when we had been warriors. This armor belonged to the first humans who fought in the stars, I said slowly. A long time ago, we weren't just explorers or scavengers. We were soldiers, defenders. "Against what?" one of the other aliens asked warily. I exhaled, my grip tightening. "Something ancient, something powerful," Thrix scoffed, but there was unease in his expression. "And you think you can stop it? Alone?" I wasn't sure, but as I looked at the ship around me, at the armor that had become a second skin, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. The ship's awakening sent a ripple through the abyss, a silent tremor that I could feel more than hear. It wasn't just power returning to the long-dead systems, it was something deeper. The ship had been waiting, dormant, its purpose unfinished. And now, because of me, it had begun again. The aliens still stood before me, caught between fear and indecision. They had come here expecting to loot a derelict wreck, to pick apart another forgotten remnant of a species they considered inferior. Instead, they had found something far older, far deadlier than they had imagined, and it had recognized me. Thrix, still glaring, bared his fangs. "You're making a mistake, human. You don't understand what you're dealing with." I met his gaze, feeling the armor tighten around my body as if it were responding to my determination. "You keep saying that," I said, "and yet it responds to me. Not you. Why do you think that is?" He had no answer.
None of them did. The ship's lights pulsed again, and suddenly the corridors came alive with movement. Drones, long dormant, detached from the walls and floated into formation, scanning the intruders. Their sleek, humanoid frames moved with
unsettling precision, their eyes glowing with the same energy that now coursed through my armor. One of them turned to me and bowed. The others tensed, reaching for their weapons, but I raised a hand. The drones made no move to attack. They simply waited. The green-scaled officer, the only one who seemed more curious than hostile, spoke up. "What is this ship's name?" he asked. "Does it remember?" I frowned, reaching out through the armor's interface. The answer came too.
Me almost instantly, carried through the ship's systems like a whisper from the past. Aegis! The word sent a shiver through me, though I didn't know why. It felt right, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Thrix snarled. Aegis? That word means shield in your primitive tongue, doesn't it? He scoffed, but I could
hear the unease beneath his bravado. What kind of shield gets abandoned in the middle of nowhere? I stared at the metal walls around me, at the glowing inscriptions that now pulsed steadily. The ship hadn't been abandoned. It had been hidden.
A final line of defense, locked away until the time was right, until I found it.
"You don't have to believe me," I said finally. "But this ship, this armor, is proof that humanity was once more than just an afterthought in the galaxy." I looked at each of them in turn. And now I intend to find out why we were forgotten. Silence stretched between us. The drones waited. The ship listened. Finally, the green-scaled officer exhaled. "Then I hope you're ready, human," he said. "Because if this ship is waking up, others will notice." I tightened my grip. Let them.